I welcome you, dear friends, respected guests, and subscribers of my channel. Thank you all very much for following the new episodes, live streams, and for joining in. Denis Eliseevich is on the line right now. Denis, I welcome you.
Hello, Alexander.
Denis, well, today, like a bolt from the blue, information broke out, and there were both denials and confirmations. In just a few hours, we saw a whole lot of news, a ton of it. Actually, all sorts of explanations and clarifications. The Financial Times article tells us about a new deadline, which we'll discuss today, and of course we'll also talk about the domestic political situation in the country. What's going on with Luzhny, who somehow dropped out of the Abudanov rankings, and why is Mindich being extradited? In general, against the backdrop of severe power outages, freezing temperatures and problems, real everyday problems like these, it all looks very intriguing. And most importantly, it serves as a good distraction from the new Kinzhal missile strikes on Lviv and, let's say, other vivid flashes of the war. As always, I urge everyone to subscribe to Eliseevich. I urge everyone to subscribe to my channel wherever you're watching this broadcast. Please, today's Wednesday, and this Wednesday we'll try to analyze everything more or less subjectively, somewhere in the middle. You can join in, leave your questions. The QR code you see on the screen is also a way to support the channel if the service is working, and of course you can display it on the screen in the YouTube community. There is an opportunity to ask a question in advance. I also encourage everyone to subscribe to the small private community of Shelest's Closed Viewers Club, where there's a great atmosphere and you can also ask questions. And of course, yes, there's the live stream chat, but that's at the very end, so make sure to watch the broadcast until the end. Today's broadcast question is like this. It's not directly about politics, although it actually is. But it's more about, entertainment and a certain transition, a symbol of moving from one attitude toward Ukraine to another. So, in the conflict around the memory helmets, let's call them that, because two athletes tried to wear helmets at the Winter Olympics from Ukraine, one with a slogan, the other with the names of fallen athletes. So, in the conflict between the Ukrainian athletes and the International Olympic Committee, whose side are you on? The options are the International Olympic Committee or the Ukrainian athletes. I'm against all of them because there are enough people like Riltsev, Pushko, and the International Olympic Committee in Ukraine already has its own performances. Yes, we need to think about something else, so I'm not for either side. Or is there another option? Does Ukraine even have winter sports? Well, it's kind of surprising considering it's already the 4th year of the war, and did they even manage to preserve anything at all? And is this news to you? Honestly, who is even following this Olympics? Well, at least in our information field, in our media space, the Olympics, especially winter sports, are really something. So there are 4 options. Let's start with that. How did you react to this scandal? Because Eliseevich, for example, says they forbade me, but I'll wear it anyway. And the Minister of Sports comes out and comments saying, if they disqualify a Ukrainian athlete, it's a shot in the foot for the international community. In short, today it all continued. It's ongoing.
To be continued. I can tell you the topic is not funny at all, but I can't help but laugh at it because it's just more hypocrisy. So what could it be? Let's put it this way. This is not the athletes' initiative. There is definitely political influence. I think it's coming from the president's office. That's usually how it happens. What's the point of wearing a helmet with either an inscription or a photo of those who died there? Or like it was, if the silencer is aimed at Moscow Mendisha, what's the point of that? I understand when what happened on October 7th in Israel and everything was real. Those photos of the victims who were kidnapped were hanging everywhere in America. Everything there was real and genuine. But here we have corruption, fake stuff. The privileged ones want us to put it on our helmets. It's absolutely in the style of a hypocritical state. You understand? If we're talking about your poll, I'm against everyone, including the International Olympic Committee. I know it's supposed to be a great organization. About the Minister of Sports, well, I was a professional athlete myself until I was 26, so I know this very well. It's all a joke. He's not a real Minister of Sports. He's just another accountant who allocates funds. He has as much to do with sports as I do with ballet.
Well then, but look, why? So, why at the Olympics now? Why is there, let's say, a demand from the authorities to use every venue as some kind of stage for a performance? Let's be honest, yes, even though I'm not a former athlete, I did commentate on soccer back in my youth. But, I mean, I respect Olympic sports and I've also commentated on non-Olympic sports, but do you understand what the issue is? It's one thing when a person wins a gold medal, stands on the podium, they're the top in their sport, in their discipline in the world, and at the awards ceremony. Yes, they remember the athletes and colleagues who have passed away, and, this shout, this slogan, at what cost is it achieved? Freedom is one thing, but when, rather weak average athletes, mostly Ukrainian athletes, who reach their maximum, their personal best. Dennis, I only saw 2 pieces of news from the Olympics when a Ukrainian athlete, a female athlete, and a male athlete, they basically outdid themselves, set a record, a Ukrainian record, but they didn't even make it to the finals. They stopped at the quarterfinals. This means the level is very low.
No, the level is low. It's clear. We don't have professional sports. It can't work to be strong. But I'm telling you this personally once again. In my opinion, even if there was Olympic gold and all that propaganda on the podium, I would still see it as hypocrisy. The state is playing its own game. Officials are doing their own thing. But here let's mourn and show the world victims, as if someone still doesn't know who Putin is. So what happened?
No subtitles. That's the point. It's a specific audience of the International Olympic Committee. So, friends, please vote. It'll be interesting to see the results of today's question. Let's move on to the most pressing and most important topic. So, May 15 is actually the deadline, and in fact, even though the Americans themselves denied that there are any deadlines, for some reason Ukraine is trying to push this. There's already a reference there. Member of Parliament Shelest says that Arakam. I spoke about this in Parliament as a member of the negotiation group. It's not like they're insisting, but the deadline is May 15. How does this fit with what we're seeing on the negotiation track? On the battlefield, strikes on the rear, and in general in Zelensky's bargaining, well, today he made another statement about Donbas. It fits into everything.
Except for the bargaining. For me, this wasn't news. I mentioned the same dates on your broadcast at the end of last year. I said the elections would be at the end of May. It's all everywhere. Well, now that the world press has confirmed it, it will be easier for people to accept this information. It's all true, and the only things that don't fit here are the Donbas issue and the Zelensky issue. The deadline, you understand, it couldn't be made public regarding Trump's deadline. Zelensky did this on purpose, in my opinion, so that if it falls through again, he can say, see, Trump couldn't make a deal again. So I think Trump's team should take note of this. Is it possible to implement this? Absolutely, yes. Why is Zelensky acting on his own? Zelensky, as always, wants to outsmart everyone. Trump, the people, the negotiations, everyone in the world. Why? Because he just wants to run for office? That's his number one goal. He wants to win. And most importantly, he wants to prevent others from running and from having a normal election campaign. That's the key thing he wants to do. That's why a law will be passed. We shouldn't even be discussing the current laws, what we did last time. Another law will be passed. Elections can be scheduled even under martial law. There's no need to wait 90 days or 6 months. You don't have to wait at all. It will be total improvisation under entirely different conditions, unlike previous legislation.
But let's also look at the situation a bit differently. From another perspective, let's look at it realistically. Realistically, Zelensky really needs the elections as soon as possible. Why? Because, well, yesterday a representative from NABU came out and said nothing has been stopped, meaning we're still working. They quickly posted bail for all the suspects. One suspect was held up, the bail was mentioned in the recordings, and there are others. Basically, everything is still under investigation. Like, don't worry, we're there. It's just that things happen quickly, like kittens being born, so time is precious. And if we talk about hypothetical elections, say tomorrow, literally, then there are no competitors. And basically, there's no need to even hold these elections. This would be a campaign for Zelensky's re-election. They'll rig whatever they need, they'll get the result they want because no one will be forced to vote, and there won't be anyone who comes out and says something or runs any kind of campaign. Or is it really that Ukrainians are so fragmented and scattered across energy and other kinds of islands that no one really has a chance? So in theory, elections are very beneficial for Zelensky. Imagine he gets re-elected, gets the mandate, but then what? Without changing the project, without changing the vertical structure, without changing the idea and the goal setting, well, you can keep fighting like everyone was recalling the other day. Yes, back in 2022, He says that the goal is to exhaust Russia, to destroy Russia, to harm Russia at the cost of Ukrainian lives. To the magazine.
It looks like you described, but actually it will be a little different. First of all, we don't know the candidates. Nobody knows the candidates. America will not stand aside from this process. I'm telling you that right away. So it won't be like we're not fools here. Do whatever you want over there. Well, Zelensky, let me remind people that in May, it will be 7 years since he's been in power. If we imagine the situation, let's say he wins the next election, that's at least another 12 years in power. Can you imagine that? No, you can't, and I can't either. So let's do this. I'll tell you. If he rigs everything he can, crushes everyone he can, fights tooth and nail, pours in huge amounts of money, of course, and wins the election, that still doesn't mean anything. And then society will have its say. Even a society like ours, which you criticize and I criticize for being passive or for other reasons. That's a question. It can't be otherwise. If someone thinks that if he becomes president, it's goodbye, guys, I've outplayed everyone. It's not going to happen. Of course, that's how he imagines it. Just like you said, he dreams of being president. I'm not even disputing that, but if he thinks this will win over part of the elites who already don't want him, and that's a significant part of the elites, the majority in Ukrainian society, it's not going to be that simple. He wants to play the game that Lukashenko and Putin are playing, but they have resources. He doesn't. Everything he has is borrowed.
Well, that's also a certain degree of freedom, don't you think? I read this thought somewhere, someone wrote it, I just can't recall the source right now. Not because it's some kind of enemy voice or anything like that, or on the contrary, because the person is pleasant or unpleasant. Honestly, I don't remember, but there was a cartoon somewhere. Yes, even a cartoon. And this description that he has nothing, well, he has, let's put it this way. He doesn't have any major assets in Ukraine. Well, the kind that are there, a house, some factories, enterprises, ships. There's nothing affiliated with him.
And he doesn't even have a car. His own registered in Ukraine.
Everything is official.
And the DACA is official too. I'm sure they sold the house, if you remember, so...
You see, the thing is, he only has, well, let's say something like air that he sells. Air meaning creativity. This is Kvartal 95. And even there, everything can be rewritten, well, to the employees of Kvartal and so on. Everything is fine there. As for assets, what other assets does he have? Well, he can just, well, at any moment take a flash drive with, well, cryptocurrency, even though it's dropping, but there are stable coins, right? So basically, he can take a flash drive and, in principle, take off wherever he wants. So actually, to be honest, I'm a little surprised. Back in the day, people would go into power to get tough, to acquire a candle factory, or maybe not a candle factory, but something more serious. To buy up some land for themselves, to get some influence, to secure access to the sea, things like that. This is everything we've seen over 30 years of independence, and we've seen these kinds of elites, where you can physically touch something and say, this is yours. And it's the same with presidents, the same with deputies. Now it feels like they don't really need anything. It's like we have some kind of plankton in our upper echelons.
His whole team is like that. That's the point. They have no motivation to try anything. Why would they need any reforms if all their finances are outside Ukraine? Everything is abroad or in crypto. They don't physically own anything here, so why should they try? For Ukraine? No, they'll end up living somewhere else anyway. The only thing is, I don't agree with you that he can just leave for wherever he wants. It's not like that at all. He literally has a choice of 3 or 4 real countries. He'll be in isolation, and if I were him, I'd be thinking about that right now. But what I know for sure is that he's obsessed. For a second term, and that's it. Like you said, he's not even considering any other options. The president's office is currently operating this way for this purpose. I even have information that an attack on NABU 2.0 is being prepared for the spring. To anticipate these nuances, let's see whether it happens or not. We see the same people in the spotlight by name. According to the investigations, these recordings by U.P. Ramak basically runs the back office from the sauna. They've planned everything for themselves.
Well, let's do the same. I actually like that comment from Masechuk. Yeah, the host says, well, Takash, what kind of disgrace is this? What kind of journalism is this, Ramak? He doesn't even hide, and he just went and found him. Can you imagine? It's as simple as that. Well, then she got a lot of hate, and she came out and said, all right, that's it. Everyone go where you belong. Who thinks that I get money from the president's office? So, how did you answer the question, is there really a reason to sincerely support and love Rermak? I'm not talking about Zelensky like that right now, but about Rermak as the embodiment of Zelensky's structure.
You see, Rermak is that kind of figure. Even those who still have rose-colored glasses on and somehow still love or respect Zelensky or Boniftik, they can't stand Rermak. The whole country hates Rermak. He's a completely toxic figure. If anyone disagrees, I'll just laugh. Only those making money off him or some hangers-on like him, I'm not even debating that. And you mentioned the cartoon you saw, but I saw a different cartoon. I don't know how true it is. But now there's something going around the internet about Chashenkov that 3 months before his execution, they published that he had 99% support and there was electricity in Romania for only 3-4 hours a day. So there are some more parallels like that. That's why I'm urging you and not to demotivate people, because if people listen to you now, and we do too, it's a very dangerous thing. And now I see this kind of narrative. I see who it's coming from, but I'm not talking about you. I mean from others. I understand that you're not doing it on purpose, but I see those who are doing it on purpose, all those guys. Zelensky is without alternative, but he'll do everything. No, 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 we'll keep fighting.
Well then, name an alternative to Zelensky.
Why? What's the point if we don't know the candidates? We don't know who will be allowed. We don't know the United States' position on this issue. Have you heard that Newsmax Ukraine, an American channel, will be launching in the spring?
To be honest, so far everything looks rather... I'm very skeptical about this. Well, I understand.
Why there isn't enough information?
Well, let's put it this way. In a country with a telethon, where there are similar informational channels, I mean, as it's positioned, an informational channel, an analytics studio, news. Well, if you look at Newsmax, what it represents, I mean, the American one, it's pro-Republican and so on, it's considered, well...
It's the fourth network in the United States.
Trump's friend owns and supports it, basically, the owner, if you can put it that way. And if you look at it, well, it's impossible for such a channel to appear in Ukraine, because either people's minds are already so brainwashed. Let's say they hire some Ukrainian journalists who are around now, they'll say, do you have them, right?
I just immediately asked which ones.
Here you have a little more freedom, take it, but they themselves, after 4 years of all this horror, they themselves won't be able to allow themselves to ask the right questions in order to weigh things analytically or even not analytically. Just by criticizing the authorities, they won't be able to allow themselves to do that. Already now everyone is like Pavlov's dogs. Everyone understands perfectly well, and I mean journalists, information workers.
Well, you understand it could be like a cover. In this case, the United States will untie their hands. Men won't be afraid of mobilization. Journalists will go, who, let's say, maybe now say one thing publicly, but internally they don't agree. What surprised me most was top management, especially Lyudmila Nemiria. That really shocked me.
Why?
Well, I don't know her personally. I know her channel, but in my view of the world, it just doesn't add up. I think there should be an ideological component here because this is very serious. In America, for example, you can't be on Newsmax and not fully support it ideologically, and vice versa. On cable news network, for example, it's the same thing. It's a very particular situation. As a media person, I think you know what I mean. So yes, there are nuances, but why are you talking about the telethon? It can be cancelled, for example, from March 1st or from April 1st. Let's say symbolically, cancel the telethon from April 1st. As I said, we don't need to worry now. The law will change and the telethon can be cancelled easily. You can't imagine the pressure in the United States right now. This is our last chance. If we don't agree now, we won't get another. Trump has been dealing with these midterm elections since June 1st. And Zelensky is also timing everything since it's like the elections are happening now. At times like this, Trump thinks if something goes wrong, he'll ignore Ukraine and focus on his own problems, but that's not how it works. You can see how quickly they shift their focus. Now, Metanyakov has arrived. He's up to date on Revitkov dealing with Israel, but in 2 hours, they'll switch to Ukraine. There's a certain underestimation of Trump's team.
The underestimation of Trump's team, it comes from half measures. Well, look at Iran. Nothing is clear. It's this kind of back and forth, one moment there's war, the next there isn't. They brought in another aircraft carrier and another one. There are planes over there last night, all night. Yesterday the planes were flying. And they were flying to Tashkent, I think, no, not Tashkent, to Tajikistan, so it's from the other side. And Trump also sent Vance there, sent Armenia and Azerbaijan, and he had such good meetings there in general, and he eats very well there together with the First Lady. Although, you have to understand Americans correctly here. That's right, I showed this yesterday during my live broadcast. How Vance meets with Aliyev and says, well, you're doing great, your food is delicious, everything is good, now let's go have dinner. And then he says, this is amazing, even my second lady, well, in America, the vice president, my second lady, he says he means his wife. I even hope nothing happens because your wife is the vice president. So, you see, from this point of view, it's subtle, it's a very delicate game, and really Americans are capable of playing a subtle game, but they're always portrayed to us as some kind of bogeyman. Now we'll get back to the negotiations, to Zelensky. I'm interested in the subtlety of the game. Don't you think that everything is much more nuanced than many people interpret it? From the very beginning of the week, when Lavrov appears on Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa television and says, the spirit of Anchorage, let's bring it back, let's speed things up like men, we need to resolve this, we agreed after all. Many saw this as a sign of weakness from the Kremlin, but subsequent events and statements on other platforms, America's silence. India is unclear, really unclear, because it's kind of a ban, but at the same time not exactly a ban. So this very strange situation actually reveals to us this subtle game, showing that things aren't so straightforward. And maybe it's just Russia and America playing a diplomatic game together behind the scenes. Well, it's nice for Zelensky to recall a skit from the student theater KVN.
Well, you basically just talked about some kind of shadowy collusion between the United States and Russia, but that's not the case. As for Lavrov getting worked up, let me tell you. They think that Trump isn't putting enough pressure on Zelensky, they'd like it to be more aggressive, faster, and they wonder why Trump isn't doing that. That's exactly the subtle game going on here. Because if Trump starts acting now the way he literally wants and would like to, it will be seen by the international community. Especially considering that in the midterm elections, the Democrats are almost taking Putin's side. That's why this is one of the ways to maintain balance. But it may look like that. In reality, there is pressure and it's very serious. The game is much more subtle, as you correctly said, than it seems. I don't know who underestimates America, except maybe Zelensky's team, maybe Putin's team also underestimates them. But with Venezuela, there were ups and downs for a long time, and then suddenly there was news. So we shouldn't underestimate them. The game will be the same for us. That's Trump's style. You never know. He'll say everything's great and an agreement is close, then threaten war the next day, or he'll threaten an attack, then stay silent for 2 weeks. That's pure Trump style, so that no one knows what to expect from him.
Regarding Donbas, it seems like the Americans don't mind. Well, basically, they don't really care about territorial concessions. But Zelensky holds on to this as his own kind of hook, which doesn't let go of the reins of negotiations and holds back the whole process. Today, Zelensky was talking about Donbas, and he said an interesting phrase. He said that we don't understand the American position. Well, if this is our territory, then we will be the ones to govern it, excuse me. What American position are we talking about? It's unclear and unknown. That's from Bankova. When so many rounds of negotiations have taken place, it's just mind-blowing. They talked less with the Russians than with the Ukrainians. The representatives of the Ukrainian delegation practically never left Miami. What else does Zelensky not understand?
That's a very accurate remark, and well, when I read it in the morning, I immediately thought about it. This is exactly the underestimation of Trump's team, and it's kind of like playing dumb. The cornerstone, the withdrawal from Donbas, why are you saying this is our territory? Well, you know, it's like saying the sky is blue, yes, of course this is our territory. If that doesn't happen, there will be no deal or United States security guarantees. After all, what's the essence of Trump's ultimatum? If you don't withdraw from Donbas now, basically not agreeing to a free economic zone? If you don't hold elections as soon as possible, forget about security guarantees, forget about my support, then you'll be left without any cards. As Trump says, Zelensky, first of all, goes against him by leaking the deadline date, first the one that was agreed upon with him and his team, And second, he does it behind closed doors. Secondly, he's talking nonsense, again, about Donbas. They said the European Union won't accept us, but still, let's try to join the European Union in some format. Second, a free economic zone. Today, he blurted out, we don't like this idea, and the Russians don't like this idea. That's the biggest mistake. Why are you speaking on behalf of the other side? Why are you doing this? Because he's playing this game which he thinks is powerful. I don't know who is advising him, but it's a complete failure, a total failure. In Trump's team, everyone sees this in a minute, and he only makes the situation worse. If Trump's goal is to disrupt negotiations, fine, focus on the midterm elections. But am I not seeing support from Europe? He was just mentioning it recently, wasn't he? And the Financial Times writes that the energy infrastructure suffered because there were no missiles. For Patriot, it's clear what we're talking about. There's a deficit in the budget overall. There's no one left to fight. We all see the tension in society. So to me, it just looks like an attempt to disrupt the negotiations. I mean, of course, I'm not saying, guys, we agree to everything. Of course, negotiate for the best possible terms, but the rhetoric should be different. Now, all that's missing is to go out and curse at Putin again, just to make it complete.
Yeah, by the rules of the genre, there should be something like that somewhere. There will probably be another episode, why not? It's just that
maybe
they tell us that this Trump is kind of reckless and unpredictable. But here again, you have to read the steps correctly, not the statements, words, or tweets, but the steps. He might write something about the bridge, he might write about his gym, well, that's Trump. He might say, I'm a crypto guy, I'm all for crypto, I'll shake things up. Everyone sees what's happening in the crypto market, for example, how it all goes down, everyone sees it. But you have to judge by actions. What do you think about this topic with the referendum in that Financial Times article? It's not just about the elections, there's also the referendum. Zelensky said a little earlier that he would put this issue to a referendum before the people of Ukraine. But I have a very important question, and it's a pressing one now, Dennis. What kind of referendum are we talking about, and where would it be held? I mean, hypothetically. Today, Lviv was hit by Kinzhal missiles, and Sadovyi came out and said they shot them all down. The Kinzhal missiles were shot down, just like Klitschko, who showed some strange missile fragment and said, these are Kinzhal missiles, they were shot down. Then everyone just laughed at it. Well, that was a while ago. Remember when the first Kinzhal missiles were launched? Yeah, obviously they won't tell us what was actually hit. But now Lviv and Western Ukraine in general are seeing that more attacks are heading their way, significantly more than before. They were already within range, and now the power is being shut off even more often. It seems like there are problems everywhere, and these problems are growing at a pretty serious rate, almost like geometric progression. So, it turns out that a referendum on the Donbas Free Economic Zone needs to be held in Lviv. And this idea that, let's have you pull back your troops by 5 to 45 kilometers and bring in some contingents from some countries, basically that's how it's going to be there. Whose police will be there? Who will keep order? But there won't be any taxes. So for now it looks absolutely ridiculous. Why? Because if this is a referendum for Donbas and its residents, well, Donbas, it has to be held, by definition, on one side of the front line and on the other side of the front line. Plus, maybe negotiate for, well, people with Donbas registration. But again, there are also options for those who left Donbas since 2014. They hardly represent, with all due respect, I'm one of them myself, but they hardly represent Donbas. Today, after roughly 12 years, what kind of referendum card is in the deck with Zelensky?
There is no card at all. The thing is, the way you're asking the question, that's not how it will be put on the referendum. On the referendum, the question will be phrased roughly like this, and there will only be one question. Do you agree to a compromise with Russia for the sake of ending the war? Well, that's just an unofficial, artistic way of putting it. The question won't be like that. And do you agree to withdraw Ukrainian troops from the 20% of Donbas territories we control? Roughly speaking, are you for peace and compromise, or are you for continuing the war? But we don't give anything away. That's how the question will be posed, and this is the demand of all sides regarding the referendum, regarding technicalities. Putin won't shoot. There will be an agreement. Putin won't shoot. At the time of the referendum, the format will be mixed. You will be able to vote by phone, well, by smartphone or physically. So it will be quite a complicated process. It won't last just 1 or 2 days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. They'll probably be counting for a long time, of course, and there will be opportunities for, like you said, in peaceful times, those little buses used to carry ballots, carousels, cookies. But now, when armed people can just transport them in a military vehicle, who's going to check anything, But at the same time, if you ask me, are you for any kind of elections, even like these? Or should we wait for proper elections? I'll tell you, I'm for even these kinds of elections. Because I know that Zelensky will lose them even if he fakes the results for himself.
And why are you so sure he'll lose if the elections are rigged and the results are faked?
Well, you ignored this last year about the referendum when I told you. And about May, I'll tell you now because I know something. No one will allow it. So he might have a short second presidential term like Yanukovych did. Then there was a third round. That's what I mean. But I don't believe it, Sasha. You can't just give yourself 20%. Do you really think you should add that for yourself? Maybe 5% is okay.
Well, it depends on what amount you're counting from. You see, we don't know how many Ukrainians there are now, and no one knows within the territory of Ukraine. In good health. All right.
What do you think his real rating is today? Real?
Well, rating again. Among whom? What kind again? Once more, because there are different hotheads. Some say that we already have less than 20 million. There are such numbers, I hear them. People speak with apparent confidence, saying maybe or somewhere, but they actually downplay the situation rather than exaggerate it. They deliberately lower this rating. Some say there are 15 million, meaning Ukrainians inside the country, the civilian population, those who are in the rear. They say things like this. Well,
definitely not more. There aren't more.
Some say 30, and some count bread, and some count something else.
Let's average it. My data shows there are about 25, 26 million in Ukraine.
Well, again, these 26, let's say 22 to 23 million will vote. They'll say there are 40 million Ukrainians, and the votes of these 26, even if he gets minus 100%, well, everyone votes against him, but they'll still scrape together a little more. Thanks to dead souls, thanks to those who left, thanks to those in hiding, thanks to those who didn't show up and didn't announce themselves at all.
Well, let's put it this way. Do you agree that today his approval rating is about 15% among all Ukrainians, regardless of the country they live in? I'll put it this way.
Well, judging by the feeling, probably yes, because that was exactly his rating before it all started. Well, around 4, yes.
Yes.
Look here.
I don't believe you can turn 15 into 35. What am I worried about? I'll tell you. You remember his recent meetings and the photos from the office of President Zaluzhin, Sternenko, Pritulov. You see that Sternenko is getting a position, Chmut is getting a position, and according to my information, Pritulova has been approved as a representative, Sarashyad. We allow you to run for mayor of Kyiv, and we wonder what was agreed with Zaluzhin, or maybe they agreed with Zaluzhin that he won't run for president. Zelensky's rating is 15 today based on how we feel. Viewers, even if you dislike me, share your thoughts in the comments. And what will the rating be if tomorrow NABU serves a suspicion notice to Yermak and then publishes more recordings? Maybe that rating will already be 8 or 10. Maybe that's how it will go. Well, that's why he's losing to everyone. But 20, I don't believe in. 20%, I think up to 10%. If he acts super aggressively, he might be able to boost it, but it won't be enough for him.
Does the situation of humanitarian, economic, and energy catastrophe in the country help Zelensky? What do you think?
Does it help his rating?
Well, look at what they did. They handed out those packages. Remember, there were baby packages, school child packages. Yes, now there are warmth packages, that is, warmth packages from Zelensky. They decided to give something to entrepreneurs there. Some money, of course. They're freaking out. I mean, regular entrepreneurs who run businesses like owning a cafe or something, I don't know, those who pay, well, for electricity.
Those ones?
Who work for themselves with their own hands, and those who run something small. And here's an interesting point. He holds the selectors every day, and he says things like, Shmigali, get ready for autumn to withstand the missiles. Look, air defense, let's get air defense. We agreed on air defense. Look how it works. This is definitely for the ratings, because the results are still hard to see.
It's all politics. Here he's trying to kill two birds with one stone. On one hand, he's showing power, but to me, honestly, very much so. Although, by the way, it's funny, but it's not funny to listen to the terrible news here. He has an evening statement. They gave loans to businesses, they gave subsidies, and for 5 minutes they list who they gave what to, but it's just some kind of fake. But look, what speaks in favor of elections and preparation is the increased activity of Alexei Goncharenko, who saw the light after 4 years and started giving speeches, and Geoler Smolchal, everyone started worrying where he was, and you saw his performance yesterday in the Verkhovna Rada. These are elections are coming up.
Thank you.
And preparations have begun.
Listen, well, Giolera, of course, yes, it was like that. People asked me, they asked everyone, they write somewhere, where is he? The same thing.
The same thing.
He was a wrestler. So do you think they brought in tame wrestlers, Soros's people? But I have a question. Why? Well, it's clear why Zelensky needs Soros people, but why do Soros people need Zelensky?
Well, at least to control him somehow, and some kind of compromise is probably more beneficial for them than a full-scale war. That's how I see it. He's still in power. They understand his administrative strength for now, and maybe they consider this the best form of confrontation. Maybe, something will deceive those guys, and those guys think we'll deceive the others, and that's possible. Well, what interests me in all this is Zaluzhny. I don't support Zaluzhny, but his position, as always, he's either silent or says something foolish. That's how it was for now.
Do you truly think Mindich will be extradited?
No, I'll tell you why. So, there have only been a few cases in the history of Israel when they extradited their citizens. I think in one of the cases it was someone with dual citizenship, a Russian, and in another case there was an Australian. But that's not the point. It has to be a mega serious crime, including on the territory of Israel, you understand? And I don't think Mindich committed any mega serious crimes on the territory of Israel. I don't believe this version and wonder why you want to extradite Mindich. NABU, if Yermak is still in Kiev, Mindich isn't leading the scheme. Here, Kolomoisky is right, of course. He may not be the last person there, but he's someone who is strictly tied by certain connections, ties, and personal trust. But they always take someone important, someone who can give up someone higher. Another argument, I'm sure if the FBI comes to talk to Mindich, Mindich will give everyone up completely. Because that's just how life works. He'll save himself and his family. Otherwise, he'll end up in prison, maybe in America. Do you understand what I'm saying? They might extradite him to America instead of Ukraine. That's also possible. And he absolutely doesn't need that.
To be continued. Zelensky, he was the one who stripped him of his citizenship. Everyone sees that clearly. Everyone understands it clearly.
Continuation is also a nuance. You see, why did he strip him of it? To completely protect him from extradition? That's why I don't understand NABU's statement. They need to prove that the president of Ukraine stripped his friend of his passport, to prove that the center of his life interests is actually in Ukraine. So why use such a complicated scheme? You could post about this for years, making one request after another, but we really know who's at the top of this pyramid. So Mindich is just a household name. It's a big scandal, that's what we call it, but he's really not the head of this whole story.
Budanov is a figurehead. Right now he's a leader without any infrastructure, not really representing much, or maybe he's just well hidden, waiting for his moment. Well, kind of a prototype, obviously with adjustments for the time and for Putin's background, but many people have compared the young Putin and the young Budanov. In what sense? In the sense that the intelligence service, which, as it turned out, once Putin ended up close to political power, to politicians, there were also clans and different forces there, and then somehow he ended up leading the country.
Let's divide it into two parts and begin with the last. I've mentioned this on your show before. Intelligence officers should never be considered for such positions. As experience shows, this is not the right approach. Regarding Budanov's current role, the president's back office is managed by Yermak, the front office is managed by Tatarov, and Budanov is in charge of negotiations. He waits, doesn't fire anyone, doesn't cause scandals, doesn't carry out purges, and apparently he's studying the situation. Without a doubt, he has his own thoughts, and of course he has some plans, but he's doing his job. You see, he doesn't make any statements, let's say, for the domestic audience. All his focus is on negotiations. We don't see any interviews. Basically, there are no political statements at all from Budanov, even though he's the head of the office. That was a compromise from Zelensky, I think. Which option is most viable? It's bad for Zelensky, but which one is most viable? Budanov was intentionally put in place, just like Arakamia. And you've also heard the rumors about the head of the Verkhovna Rada. And by the way, if they don't hold a referendum, then the Verkhovna Rada will have to ratify this whole thing, and Stefanchuk won't do that. Well, in short, there's not much time. Everything is very complicated. But you see, if things don't go as planned, we'll just lose Ukraine. Not to Putin anymore. Putin has done his part. But to this green, sorry.
One nuance. Well, it seems like we discussed the timing of the referendums according to the Financial Times material. Time, referendums, elections, all these points we even touched on Donbas, regarding, so to speak, the Americans' proposal. There's also another one parallel to the Financial Times information. So yes, Zelensky is ready for elections and a referendum. But lately there's been talk that a delegation from Kyiv is ready to go to Moscow for negotiations. And supposedly this was discussed at the closed session in Abu Dhabi, which is very interesting information. So actually, if that's really how it looks, for example, like a sensation, it's just explosive, well...
It's true, I'm telling you, it's true. You know, making powerful statements is easy. So what Moscow, I won't go, but I'm on the air, though I've always said, well, if it's necessary for business, then I'll have to go to Moscow too. And there's nothing unusual about it, because that's exactly how everything has always worked in world history. No back alley deals, nothing like that. That won't happen. There will be tough decisions, that's the truth, but let's argue. Within 2 hours, someone will deny it. Some Sibigo will say, no way, I'll never go to Moscow.
Yes, it's exactly the same as with the material that came out today and caused a lot of noise. They immediately rushed out and quickly started denying it, although honestly it would have been something. At least it looks very appealing in that sense. I mean, politically, that's the kind of information it is. In reality, it's clear that the Ukrainian authorities have a completely different task right now, to dodge Trump's pressure as much as possible. Basically, not to withdraw troops, not to give in. So refuse, stall, and then hope that Trump backs down. And now, what news is coming our way? How is Europe covering the rear? Epstein's materials are involved there. Supposedly there are tons of files, and there are also mirror files. Well, in short, it's a whole movement going on right now. They even publish ads in newspapers about this. I'll add you to the files. I'll remove you from Epstein's files. There is supposedly confirmed information that Epstein wrote to someone that Macron has a boyfriend, and Macron was kind of joking about it. In his correspondence, Epstein wrote that it means the Frenchman has your back, covers you from behind, those kinds of jokes about it, yes. Macron is technically ready to meet with Putin, while Ursula von der Leyen is not ready. Because, let's say, her subordinate Kaja Kallas says that conditions should be set for the Kremlin, that the Kremlin should reduce its army after the war as part of the agreement. Why pressure only Ukraine? We should pressure Moscow too. Look, it's one thing if this is being discussed there or somehow written out, if it's being coordinated by some major players. But when this comes from Kaja Kallas, it sounds like a joke. Why is she saying this at all? And what do you think? Will Europe lend a helping hand or cover its own back?
You were just talking, and I'll just state once again how dire the state of politics is in Europe. Macron and Ursula have their own agendas, and Ursula and Kaja Kallas have a poor relationship. They dislike each other. All this will end with the fact that in the European Union, the leader of the European Commission will be elected by all European Union citizens, not just a handful of bureaucrats. That's a fact about the reduction of the Russian army. All this reminds me of typical globalists who are now coming out and writing that Putin should pack his things, and leave Ukraine. Well, fairy tales, people who live in an unreal world, we would all like that, at least I would. But these people don't live in the real world, they're in a fairy tale, and some part of society surely believes them. This is the division in Europe, among other things. If Macron has one opinion and Ursula has another, that says a lot.
It says Starmer. Today she announced and wrote about a new policy. First of all, he doesn't want to leave. Starmer, against the backdrop of the Epstein scandals, says, I'm not going anywhere. Are you kidding? No, first of all. And secondly, Starmer is basically going to buy weapons in America. For Ukraine, this is preparation for Trump's departure when he will wash his hands of it and achieve nothing after May 15.
I'm not sure what to think anymore. You know, it's one thing to make a statement, another to actually buy it, and a third for the United States to agree to sell it.
No, the United States is still agreeing for now.
I know that this will also be a bargaining chip. Let's see, you know, discussing statements from people who have no support in their own countries right now. Starmer has no support. They're all leaders with negative ratings. Starmer, Macron, Merz, they're leaders with negative ratings in their countries. Sanchez in Spain, these aren't leaders supported by the whole country. And when they make a statement, I just read it like you and forget about it the next day.
Regarding Ukraine, we're live right now. It's 18:08 Kiev time, and it's expected that those ominous announcements will happen again. In general, either tonight or the night after, basically in the next 2 days, there will be some kind of massive combined shelling. They're preparing for it. Kiev has been warned. The Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Kiev City Administration are coming out and telling people to stock up on water and supplies to get whatever they can. So the situation is actually very tense. Because of this, the main question arises, holding meetings every day and seeing that the number of houses with heating is not increasing. Seeing how Sinigubov comes out and he openly says, "We are declaring a state of emergency to get money. He comes out, there's zero emotion on his face. That's understandable. There was no electricity and there still isn't. But I want a regime so I can take as much as I need from the stash and use it." It looks like all these expenses are just patching holes on these pointless programs. It just looks like, I don't know, something pointless. Well, it's like when there's a fire in a store, in a supermarket, and people are running out, rushing, grabbing as much as they can carry, some groceries, some from the alcohol section or some other section. They're taking things, but they're not saving the business owner. They're just taking because it's all gonna burn anyway. That's what it looks like. And you see, that's the scariest part of the situation. No one is telling the truth, but all sorts of energy experts come out and say, we already have nothing left to repair the thermal power plants, substations, transformers. So it turns out one or two, let's say 4 combined strikes that hit the target. And the air defense says, no, I don't have any missiles for air defense. And today NATO comes out and says, Zelensky, what are you talking about? Do you have missiles for air defense? We supplied something, but don't lie, Zelensky. Today there was a comment refuting Zelensky's words, and you did have air defense. But that's not the point here, you understand? There are 2, 3, 4, a few strikes left. And basically, even then, all these calculations about well-being become meaningless. Do you think Zelensky is willing to go to the edge?
Yes, he has no other choice. He is ready to go. And he will go if NATO contradicts his words. Let's recall his speech in Davos, where he basically scolded Europe for not being thorough enough, for not being decisive enough regarding Sinihubov's statement. Officials are the consequence? Well, a classic manifestation of a flawed system. They will use any situation. Just make money in peacetime. Let's make money in wartime. And how do you make money during a war? Humanitarian catastrophe. Hey, how can you make money here? That's how it works. Until people get this, nothing will change in Ukraine. Not until there's a critical mass about those so-called expert statements. I calculated it would take 3-4 years and 600 million euros to build some kind of thermal power plant there. I mean, that's just crazy talk, complete nonsense. I also agree about the shelling, and there will be more of it because it will strengthen the Russians' position at the negotiating table. It's pressure and it's demoralizing for society. Of course they will do it. Now, I want to take a step back. Regarding Moscow, next week there should be a negotiation meeting in America, and if after that things really start to heat up, maybe not in Moscow, maybe on some other neutral territory, but what if it is in Moscow? That's just an indication that everything is moving toward a conclusion. And this meeting in the United States is also a positive sign. You must understand, the negotiations aren't stalled or regressing, they're just receiving less media attention with occasional leaks to the press.
I'm cynical, that's just how I am. It's kind of a rhetorical question. If after good and constructive negotiations in Abu Dhabi there was an assassination attempt on Alexeyev, then before the meeting in Moscow, who will be targeted next?
Well, someone will be targeted, we'll have terrible shelling, there's a war going on, and as long as it continues, everyone will be doing things like this. Maybe it won't be something like that. Maybe there will be a strike on Russia's energy infrastructure, most likely some kind of attack. He constantly promotes this, urging action and saying he's awaiting security service of Ukraine operations in Russia. While negotiations continue, he announces that he has ordered the security service of Ukraine to conduct operations there. Well, that's how it is. Yes, that's how it will be.
Do you agree that if Zelensky gives up, say, Donbas, for example, he will give it up to the Peace Council and Chairman Trump? If anyone is going to be held responsible, it won't be Zelensky, but Chairman of the Peace Council, Trump. Well, I mean, according to these peace agreements, I just remember there was some really great articles about this somewhere about 6 months ago. Yeah, when we went into that fall, it wasn't like this. Everything felt scary. People warned things could get bad, and everyone was anxious and hoping for something. There was some really great Western analysis saying, look, Zelensky will fuss around, try to wriggle out of things, but in the end, he'll give everything up, just like in the spirit of Anchorage. We just don't know how. That's why we talk like this, because even if we imagine the worst case scenario, let's say the division of Ukraine, all of that, meaning the withdrawal of troops. But all of this will be presented in such a way that Trump is to blame, Trump, and America will be up in arms and say, how could Trump so shamelessly betray Ukraine and the hero Zelensky? And this will be a powerful blow from the globalists to the Republicans, from the Democrats, well, basically to the Republicans. And that's supposedly the idea behind it. Moreover, there was some very interesting, let's say, positions by state mentioned, and now if we rewind about 6 months. Well, I'll be honest, it's kind of coming true because the Democrats are winning a number of local elections there. What I mean is, it turns out that the goal is sort of to die or burn for the sake of, well, or to be a bonfire for the sake of the Democrats' victory and comeback in the United States elections.
No, thank you. Well, that's too complicated a combination. It's not feasible. But of course, the media will say everything the way you're describing. Well, the globalist media, look at what Trump has led to. But I just want to correct the terminology, despite all my dislike for Zelensky. No one is forcing anyone to give up Donbas. Surrender is the wrong term. No one is demanding troop withdrawal or recognition. And here it's also important to explain things correctly, since this comes from our delegation, or let's say from Ukrainians in general, from officials. When I hear surrender or recognize, that's a lie. It's not true. To leave Donbas, to withdraw troops, that's it. No one is surrendering anything to anyone. No one is officially capitulating according to documents. That's very important. These details matter.
Well, wait. There was information from Western media sources that at the negotiations in Abu Dhabi, Russia held its position. And the issue was discussed that all countries should recognize the territorial acquisitions of the Russian Federation. Thank you. The text says all countries, but I don't think that's accurate.
They want it, of course, but Russia will begin with maximum demands and then reduce them, not the reverse. Naturally, they'll ask for as much as possible. First you surrender, didn't work, then give up territories like Kherson, the West, didn't work, now it's Donbas. This is a normal negotiation process. People shouldn't see it as the only way things can be. It's a complicated process, it's negotiations, everyone will make concessions. It's just that some will give up more, some less.
And where are they taking people now, Dennis? TSK, yeah, it's just terrible. Well, just in the last few days, it seems like people have only just moved on from the murder of the former police officer, well, a former militiaman, yeah, a retired militiaman, 55 years old, who was caught there. He had 3 kids, everything was fine with him, I mean, in terms of being on the special register. They don't even check now whether you have documents or not. Well, if they see that you're young, they might just let you go, but if they see you're of the right age, they might, so to speak, persuade you by various methods to sign up and go as a volunteer. But right after that case, there was another widely discussed incident when a man was walking his dog, both covered in blood, the dog and the man, in Odessa. Basically, all kinds of crazy things like this are happening in many regions. Zelensky clearly told Fedorov that he needs to sort things out and finish the digitalization. Everyone is shocked, saying Zelensky actually said the word digitalization himself, but we see that things are only getting worse. Why?
Because such a process has been launched, such a flywheel has started, such a Pandora's box has been opened that it's very hard to close, and indeed he did say the word digitalization. But I want to explain the mechanism, how this happens, why are there more and more outrageous cases? You understand that only a certain percentage makes it to the press or the internet. It's not 20, not 30, not half, not 100%. What is human psychology? I've experienced this myself. Many have contacted me during the war, sharing awful stories, documents, photos, and information about their relatives. They say, but we were told if this gets into the press, you're done for. If it doesn't, we'll try to help you. And many people are afraid, and when someone isn't afraid and makes it public, then the next person is less afraid too. Why are they so afraid of the politics of all this disclosure? People shouldn't stay silent here. In fact, there are an incredible number of such cases. Real state terror is happening. And it will be very difficult for them to deal with this. Because on top of the big business built around mobilization, there are smaller businesses. Local ones involving a lot of people. Just try to stop that. Let's consider that Zelensky may have said this publicly just for the elections. Who are these guys? You see, I'm against this, but there are bad people on the ground there. It's not me. And you can't rule that out. It's just a purely promotional statement.
Just today, Deputy Gorbenko comes out and says that there are 2 million draft dodgers. Well, the ones Fedorov talked about, they basically need to be... Now, unprecedented measures will be taken to round them up and basically force them to serve. But if I appeal to your entrepreneurial Ukrainian spirit, if I appeal to that, then basically you were an entrepreneur from the very beginning. So blogging is just one part of it. It's something that appeared after 2022, right? And there are things that happened during the year, during the start of the war. So, are there any methods like that which can really replace it? But these men are hiding, going to the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, those who don't want to serve. They will really be forced to serve.
None of this exists, and maybe that's one of the reasons why nothing works out. So much filth has already happened, and people are so disappointed in the state, they're afraid of the state, they despise the state, they understand what's happening at the front, they understand that there's a war going on now. There's nothing to fight for except the presidential positions, and people just don't want that. Right now, you could already open recruitment centers like the American ones, as I originally suggested. There will be decent people working there, everything will look nice and loyal, but even for big money, people won't go, no one will. That's why I've said for years that the war must end. Nothing will work anymore. Trust is completely lost. And now the only thing left is to create a professional contract army based on the American model. Nothing else will work. This is for decades to come. The state has buried itself in terms of trust.
Well, what, do we have a good state? Well, yes, it's good, humane. See, they did come back from captivity. Dolinsky, I think, is the surname of the prisoner of war from Mariupol who was captured in Mariupol. And so there was the last exchange, but according to the DNA test results, he turned out to be dead. His family has already received 15 million hryvnias because of him. And so for several days we kept going back and forth, almost a week in Abu Dhabi. And then this exchange happened on the second day. Then the Ministry of Defense comes out and announces, right during our live broadcast, that the family does not have to return the 15 million hryvnias. A small victory, a little joy, everyone was happy. So that's how this story went. But what happens next? Let's be honest. When Zelensky says 55,000 dead, no one believes it. Everyone doubts it. They immediately multiply it by 15 million.
Once again, I confirm what we discussed 5 minutes ago. A corrupt system is always on top. There are prisoners, there are payouts, so let's figure out how to make money off of it. Fake DNA samples were obtained, maybe someone split the money with someone else, and so on and so forth. It's terrible. That's why the government should stay out of people's lives to prevent this from happening again. I have nothing more to say about this. That's it, that's all. There are simply no polite words to describe.
Look at it from the point of view of law enforcement, from the point of view, Zelensky's always using the words justice, fairness, look at it from the point of view of law enforcement, of justice. Is this the right decision? Let's be honest. So the state shouldn't demand money, right? The state, it's their mistakes. They don't have procedures. They don't have us. We are not there. But I think from this perspective, the decision is correct. The state is rotten. That's where the question arises. And inform the memory helmets of Ukrainian athletes at the Olympics and the International Olympic Committee and so on. Whose side are you on? 4% of Ukrainian athletes support, 26% are against, 27% are against everyone. And is there even winter sports in Ukraine at all? And 42% are on the side of the International Olympic Committee. Well, you see, that's how it goes. That's how it goes. This boomerang, it comes back. It seems, remember, there was this whole story about canceling Russian athletes in 2022-2023. And now you see how it has turned around. All the football players say you need to play football. Others, like water polo players, say you need to play in the pool, jump into the water. You need to run, basically. You need to keep practicing. It feels like this is exactly the main signal that we are moving toward the end of the war.
Well, among other things, Russia is a dictatorial state. And for autocracies, for a dictator, sports have always been important. State sports, results. Putin and Trump discussed this a lot, specifically sports. The consequences of special sanctions, participation in competitions. This is very important for Putin's propaganda. This is on the table, no matter how insignificant it may seem to someone. It means that person doesn't understand anything. Well, of course, yes, of course. And indeed, everything is moving toward them being allowed more and more gradually.
Yes, dear friends, thank you all very much for already leaving a like. Let's move on to your questions, starting with the YouTube community. So the question, yes, well, it's a question, as I understand it, a rhetorical one, to hold out until the congressional elections. And what then? Asks the viewer.
But he doesn't know for sure at all. I know that Zelensky has no long-term plan. He's playing the short game. And then we'll figure it out as we go. That's how they see it.
Well, look, the Democrats won, but honestly, if we look at the makeup of the Democrats, you know more about this, especially now. Yeah, Newsom and all those people, Kamala pops up once every 5 years and they'll show us Biden moving around on his own. There's a bit of a change in leadership among the Democrats. I don't think the Democrats will recklessly start handing out blank checks and empty promises, sending money to Ukraine on those planes to Rzeszów. For some reason, I just don't think that's going to happen at all. For example, already by the end of 2026 or in 2027,
I also don't quite believe in the support under Biden, but maybe Zelensky was privately told if events unfold like when Boris Johnson visited, history might be repeating itself. And he's counting on that.
Go on. Dennis, greetings. I have a question for you as an economics expert, since you assess the size of Russia's gross domestic product only in nominal United States dollars. Do you believe that Russia's economy grew by 30% last year following the ruble's exchange rate? Or do you consider the Russian authorities' estimate of 1% growth last year to be more accurate? In other words, do you only take the nominal gross domestic product in dollars into account when it puts Russia in a less favorable light?
No, in economics, the objective indicator is the nominal gross domestic product in dollars. Since Russians understand, listen, we have such resources, we have such a huge country, and yet somehow the gross domestic product is embarrassingly low, so we need to come up with something. That's why they say, no, we need to calculate gross domestic product by purchasing power parity. There we have 7 billion or 6 billion instead of 2.5. That's a classic story. Sadly, Ukrainians today aren't much different. propaganda has affected them too, though not in the same way. Russia's gross domestic product is $2.5 trillion, even lower than Italy's gross domestic product, which doesn't have a resource-based economy and isn't doing very well. That's how it is, that's all.
2.5 what dollars?
$2.5 trillion is Russia's gross domestic product.
Yeah, and billions, I think that means something. Alexander Kotov asks, Alexander, please find out if there is such a person in Ukraine whose order will be carried out in the armed forces, even if it is painful. Well, I assume this is a hint about either retreating or not shooting or in general withdrawing. There is such a person, an authority, as you can see.
No, there isn't only one such person, nor is it necessary. Some in the military have one view, others differ, and there are intermediaries throughout. By the way, this was actually one of the important topics at the negotiations, that the army needs to be prepared first for these withdrawals, for monitoring, and not to announce a political decision first and then have the army adjust afterwards. That's what they're working on now. Don't you think the army is already working on this behind the scenes? They regularly conduct surveys among the servicemen there, and there's also propaganda work going on and so on. I know this firsthand. There's no longer a single authority like Zaluzhny that everyone follows. Political influence will play a role, and a referendum could really help. But the people, especially the guys, don't want it.
So that means Lina Vostrilova. The Maidan divided the country into 4 parts. Those who wanted to step aside did so in different directions according to their own interests. Everything that's happening, the troubles, these are just nuances and incidental signs of the main point, the realization of the international right to self-determination. She asks the question.
Honestly, I still don't get it. The question is about Maidan. Why discuss it now in 2026? It's been 12 years. What's the point?
Have you already buried the spirit of Maidan? No?
I've already discussed it, drawn my conclusions, learned a lot of interesting things, and that's it. Yes, there was such a thing as Maidan, but I don't see any point in going back to it. Russians have a very small space for maneuver. It's either Maidan or gross domestic product by purchasing power parity, not much room to move. They're not ready to talk, and instead of being constructive, they just spread hatred.
Well, look, here's a constructive question, but as for the international one, hold on.
I didn't understand the question.
Well, if you didn't understand, then why are you saying that the question about self-determination and international law is not constructive? Right now, that's actually a key point. Is there even such a thing as international law as such? Let's say, hypothetically, that's actually another argument on the topic of the referendum. Well, let's say yes, a referendum. Okay, we've decided on which territories Ukrainians are holding the referendum, maybe about Donbas or about this economic zone or about the 20 points of the plan. Lavrov came out today and said, actually, that's being confirmed there. A number of other people say that, well, indeed, no one in Moscow is officially counting these 20 points. I mean, only Zelensky on Espresso keeps talking about 20 points, remember. He kept going on about 20 points, 20 points. Moscow doesn't have them. And the Americans haven't given them to Moscow for one simple reason. They understand that it will be rejected, so they're arguing with Ukraine about these points. So there is no international law when Trump comes out and says, I want Greenland, I want Venezuela. What kind of international law are we talking about? It turns out that the clause about self-determination, which is written in international law, can also be interpreted however you want. Let's say tomorrow a Canadian province decides to join the United States of America. What would happen then? The same thing as in Donbas.
We can't just rush through such serious issues, quickly moving on to the next question from the next viewer. How can you compare Greenland and Crimea? So...
Wait, hold on. International law and the issue of self-determination. The Americans did propose the issue of a referendum for the Greenlanders.
Yes.
They offered money, I mean like aid.
It was unofficial. Officially, no one offered anything.
They just left.
To the press and said,
officially, there are 2 ways. The first way is something we can officially touch. The Greenlanders were offered a referendum, right, and to buy it from Denmark, but Denmark immediately refused, saying, we won't sell anything, leave us alone. As I understand it, the claims to Greenland remain unresolved. And as I understand it, they'll probably go down the path of a referendum or maybe some broader kind of agreement. Although Trump clearly said that military force is basically out of the question, well, that's the path of self-determination. The little green men will arrive. They're already there, by the way. There's exactly the same kind of United States base there as there was a Russian base in Crimea. And they'll ensure a referendum is held, and all the Greenlanders will say, we want to join America. And then what? It's the same situation here. No.
It's a shame Gennady Balashov, who passed away, isn't here. You could have invited him. He would have shared his experience from Crimea's annexation when the little green men arrived. This YouTube video shows Gherkin's gang kidnapping him. The beatings aren't shown anymore, just the aftermath, but the kidnapping is still there. And what kind of threats were there? What kind of danger? Where do American soldiers force someone, kidnap someone, torture someone at gunpoint? It will be a referendum if it takes place without anyone, without anything. A real referendum, a genuine one, under the supervision of the international community. These are not bandit methods. And calling black-white like this, I'm sorry, I can't sign up for that.
Wait, you are looking at Crimea and Greenland in the context of international law, of a referendum. In this case, in the case of a referendum, once again, you seem to reject that there are any parallels here at all. Thank you.
Of course, a real referendum within the framework of international law and self-determination, as you said. A referendum is when you send in saboteurs, agents to vote at gunpoint, which is not disputed. I'm not claiming most Crimeans supported Ukraine. I'm not saying that. But technically, it was a forceful gangster-style takeover. Of course, that's different because otherwise Putin wouldn't have been allowed to do it. That's a separate issue. But these are completely different situations, absolutely different situations.
What Putin did?
That's annexation.
All right, I understand. And Canada?
What about Canada?
A province in Canada that's negotiating secretly, allegedly. Bessenty made it public, saying, we're negotiating, it's Alberta, I think that's the name of the province.
Yes.
A lot of energy resources, and it really wants to become part of the United States of America too. What do you call this? You can call it separatism, you can call it illegal annexation, you can call it, well, basically a violation of international law.
No, the right to self-determination. Sasha, what? Why are you laughing? Wait, let's calm down. There are American troops there, the residents of this Alberta, little green men are walking in the streets. Open the video of Balashov in Crimea. Well, is there anything like that in Alberta or not? There just isn't. There's nothing like that. So why are you laughing? If something like that happens there, we'll go live. I'll stand by my words, but there's nothing like that there. Thank you.
You're laughing. No, well, what? It's interesting. Like, we talked, everyone understood everything. Of course we understood. So, a question for Dennis. How can Ukraine be a neutral country if it owes money to Europe and Russia is a constant threat? Our country was deliberately driven into a debt trap to make us dependent on the West. What is the way out of this situation? After all, it's the one who pays, well, whoever pays calls the shots, right? The one who pays is the one who leads the dance? The user asks this question.
Well, maybe someone did want to trap us on purpose, but nothing is impossible. Or as Boris Johnson said, don't end the war. Yes, you can talk, but there's President Zelensky, the official president of the country, at that time fully legitimate, and he makes the decision. Do you understand what it means to ruin something? How Ukraine's economy is collapsing? How it's becoming debt-ridden? It's a huge, huge process. This is just completely mismanagement. No, it's corruption, it's stupidity from the people and everyone else. It's the wrong choice, it's terrible corruption, it's the constitution, it's terrible laws. We are all to blame for this, but first and foremost, those who were in power. It's our fault that people don't want to change anything, to choose a different concept. Ukraine, maybe it was neutral or independent on the issue. Those are two different things.
A neutral country, neutral, well...
That's different, you see. Being independent is a different matter entirely. And being neutral, well, of course it can be neutral. Why can't it be neutral? A different policy is needed in all areas, including the economy.
So, after the war, Denis Savinkov writes to you, after the war, the country has two enemies, the old elites with a sense of revenge and the new populists with a sense of the stage. The former remember everything and want it all back, the latter remember nothing but promise everything. Society falls in love quickly, gets disappointed even faster, and every time looks for a savior, preferably without flaws and with a miracle in his pocket. Populism paves the way for revenge, revenge gives rise to populism again, the pendulum keeps swinging and the country grows tired. So what is more dangerous now, the revenge of the past or the illusions of the future? And finally, to stop choosing a ruler of minds and start building a system that doesn't depend on the next hero.
A person who asks that question doesn't know how to do it, but I do. To do this, you need to reduce the government apparatus, minimize the state as much as possible, and privatize everything. That's right. I'm just skimming the surface, telling you the very beginning of what needs to be done, but the question is, who is going to build this system? A new system should be built with minimal government involvement. As long as government remains large, people won't change, and there won't be genuine individuals. And I'm against the idea of abolishing the position of President of Ukraine, which, as you know, is now gaining a lot of momentum from all camps, from many places.
Alexei, good evening. Alexander, Denis, the question concerns Venezuela, Cuba, Greenland, India, the South Caucasus, and finally, the tankers. Maybe it's time for Trump to stop and end the war in Ukraine, or is Zelensky just too much of a burden for him? Or maybe it's simply beneficial for the head of the White House. Europe keeps paying for weapons, the money keeps coming in with respect.
How much does Europe spend on weapons?
4.5 billion was the last package, so
that's tiny compared to the United States gross domestic product of 31 trillion. No, if Trump benefited from the war, he would have implemented a completely different policy and wouldn't be doing this. And believe me, Witkoff, Kushner, and Trump are busy enough without this. They're focused on Ukraine because Trump needs a distraction. Peace?
Yes, Oksana. Just like the speakers and guests on the channels provide a detailed analysis of every word from Western representatives in the context of negotiations. At the same time, they completely ignore all the statements from the Kremlin which consistently claim that peace is possible based on anchorage. Doubts are tormenting Oksana, she writes. I'm tormented by doubts that Russia agreed to the terms in Alaska. An army of 800,000 NATO troops and this free economic zone. So what's the point of the heated discussion if Russia is against it?
The point is that the United States is a mediator, and there are negotiations and compromises. Russia's compromise will be very small from their side, while from our side, of course, the expectations are huge. That's the difference. Both sides will compromise and be unhappy, but Russia will likely be only slightly dissatisfied, while we will be much more so. That's the mediator's role. The girl or woman wants everyone to raise their hands and do what Russia says. Why are we discussing foreign media? Because Russia always lies.
Well,
I speak for myself, you for yourself.
Yes, let's move on to the broadcast chat. Thank you for the interesting broadcast, writes a user. Question for Dennis. Who will choose the president of Ukraine, the United States, or Ukrainians? What do you think?
Ukrainians will choose the president of Ukraine. Will the United States influence this process? Yes, thank you. Will Russia influence this process? Yes. Who is disputing that? You can phrase things beautifully, but the truth remains unchanged.
Thank you. A question from... Alright, I won't read handle. So, basically, I have a user who just shows up without a first or last name, only with the OW symbol, so friends, sorry if I don't call you by name. The question is, Namiria was always left. Do you believe that she will promote the Republican Party in Ukraine through this channel, Newsmax?
That's why I said I was surprised by the management. Her husband is in the Batkivshchina party, you know, he's a member of parliament, I think. That's why I was surprised and told you that ideology should come first here. So maybe we should wait. Maybe someone misunderstood something too early. The information wasn't released. I had different information. I won't disclose it, but I didn't have this one.
I recognized espresso. Serhi writes, in a conflict of interest between Ukraine, the old homeland, and the United States of America, the new homeland, whose side will you be on? Eliseevich, by definition, on the side of the United States of America. Or does he think that there can't be any contradictions between the interests of Ukraine and America regarding Ukraine?
So there is no new or old homeland. I am a citizen of Ukraine. I have only one homeland, Ukraine. As for something being beneficial for the United States but not for Ukraine, that's impossible. Whatever is good for the United States is always good for Ukraine. It's not beneficial for Zelensky. That's a completely different issue. For me, Ukraine is not Zelensky.
Trump's policies are leading the Republican Party to defeat. That's what the current ratings in the United States are saying. Won't Trump become a disappointment for you? Like with Zaluzhny, you supported him before, but now you're against him?
Yes, I supported Zaluzhny, supported him, and he disappointed me at an early stage. It wasn't me who said, guys, he's good, and then he somehow, or maybe I was wrong, that's a completely different story. I supported Trump, I support him, probably will keep supporting him, we'll see. But regarding Zaluzhny, he was the one who disappointed me. It's not like I disappointed someone or changed my mind. I started supporting Zaluzhny almost before anyone else. Then I saw he was doing something else. He didn't want it. I wasn't the one who did that. I probably expected more from him than he does from himself. I guess I saw in him something that he didn't see in himself. How can you compare things like that? I've supported Trump for decades, even back when I was in business. Well, not supported. Let's say I sympathized with him.
As a politician?
I support him even if there are mistakes.
Dennis, how is Trump's lithium at 2% for Ukraine different from Biden's son and his company Burisma?
It's completely different. It's different because people read the press, don't understand what's written there, read fake news and so on and so forth. It's very different. The difference is that with Biden there was direct corruption, and here it's either this way or not at all. You don't have to share with the United States. You can just stay here until Russia claims and develops these lands. That's another option.
To develop them together with the United States?
Well, that option isn't ruled out either. Yeah, that option isn't ruled out. The world is changing. I don't really believe it, but I admit it's theoretically possible.
Why don't I really believe it? In Donbas, this was discussed in the spirit of anchorage, the development of rare earths in the territory of Donbas that remained under the control of the Russian Federation. No one, well, you know, all the moves are recorded. We remember that. That's what it is.
That's why Dmitry said we're about to sign for 12 trillion, which is funny since that's 5 or 6 times Russia's gross domestic product. It's technically impossible. Most likely he meant fossil resources and calculated how much is roughly in the ground, and for greater effect he announced such an unrealistic figure. Ukraine signed the United States up for 7 trillion there, we can put it that way.
So you don't believe in Dmitriev's package, that it's something? Yes, of course not.
It could be 12 trillion, 6 times Russia's gross domestic product. That's technically and physically impossible.
To be continued. So does the number bother you?
Of course, definitely there will be some cooperation. I don't believe in 12, I believe in 2.
But in 2 for 6 years? No.
I understand that it won't happen in a year and not right away. Well, yeah, everyone counts differently, everyone counts differently. Like I said, maybe he counted what's underground, and most likely that's what happened.
So did the amount of drugs decrease after Maduro was kidnapped?
So basically everything that goes by water has been almost completely eliminated, but now a lot is coming by land and they're working on it. People always want to make me into some kind of lawyer. Your audience wants to catch me on something. I'm working on Ukraine. I have a reform program. Don't make me an advocate for anyone, Trump, Putin, or Zelensky. Or a press attaché.
Yes, friends, thank you for bringing us back to different questions. Yes, this is a user writing, I'm Sasha. I watched an interview with the former mayor of the capital, Greenland. He says that they are really preparing for separation from Denmark, but for now they can't manage economically. So if the money issue is resolved, then that's how it will be.
Greenland is subsidized. Denmark gives them nearly $1 billion a year. The United States won't do that. And while people expect to get richer, there won't be subsidies. Well, it will be a self-sufficient region.
Well, we asked this question. Thank you very much for bringing it up again in the chat. Let's do it this way. Well, Dennis said that there are adequate presidential candidates, but who didn't say that, Dennis? I'm sure there are these adequate potential candidates.
Candidates. We'll only find out when the elections are announced and how they will register. Thank you.
So, thank you for the meeting guests, different interesting topics. Eliseevich is great, a fearless guy. Thank you both. Yes, thank you, really. You know, with this comment, I kind of wanted to start like this kindness flash mob. Because listen, whenever you go to our comments section, some stream with Dennis Eliseevich starts like this. Write something nice. Listen, there had to be at least something good in our broadcast today. Well, I'm just joking, exaggerating, of course. Thank you for... Well, in general, it's a smart, critical audience. Let's put a period on the domestic American topic. Alexander is asking Leonov a question. Is the Bush family, Bush Sr. and Bush Jr., or the Clinton family in the United States, an example of clan-based politics, dictatorial manipulation, corruption, or something else? In parentheses, please keep in mind that the Democrats are basically half of the American electorate's preference. This is a very important question in this context. Yes, it's mostly the Democrats who label everyone there saying, this one is a dictator, and so on. So now we're going to go and change the regime there because they're dictators, but look at the clans. Specifically, the Democrats have their own clan mentality.
Yes, it's clan mentality, but it's not a dictatorship. No one forbids people from expressing their opinions, running for office, or winning elections anymore. Although they did try to, with Trump that one time, you know what I mean? Well, it got to such a terrible point. That's why Trump came. You understand? When bias leans one way, someone with the opposite bias will eventually appear, leading to unpleasant incidents and mistakes. It's better to avoid biases and maintain balance from the beginning. Well, history...
Yes. Friends, thank you all very much for today's broadcast, for being here. Dennis, thank you for your time and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Subscribe and take care of yourselves and each other. Wishing everyone kindness and light. See you.